A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
And a conversation over this coming hour you might want to join into, and you might have your own experience, be it good or bad. You might recognise there are some weaknesses or some strengths that you'd like to be able to talk about today as we talk about the rise of homeschooling. And the rise of homeschooling in Australia has been very significant as parents' concerns have been around things like government policies or the school environment, concerns for children, and of course there are going to be in there some religious reasons why people might pursue homeschooling. It's a big step for some parents to take full responsibility for their children's academic learning. Well, our special guest today says there are some negative experiences within school environments and an increased interest in parents for engaging with their children's education. Dr. Terry Harding is back with us. He's an academic consultant, a long-time advocate for Australian Christian homeschooling. 31 years he's been at the helm, and before that, a principal of 5 schools. So he's got both sides for the sort of contrast and comparison that we might be thinking about. Terry Harding, a special welcome back to 2020.
Thanks very much, Neil. It's a joy to be here, and good morning to all listeners.
And, you know, we might even say at this moment, Terry, a special congratulations, because 31 years at the helm there at Australian Christian Homeschooling, and you've just called it a day, and you're moving into a new phase in the consultancy, but also in, you know, what you might say retirement years.
Yeah, that's my new phase for my wife and I, and we're very excited about it and learning a different way of living.
Fabulous stuff. Let's also begin with something which I think is particularly interesting, because when we think of homeschooling, sometimes parents are going to be thinking this is a new phenomenon, but this has been with us right from the beginning of colonisation here in Australia.
Indeed. Well, informal education, of course, with the Indigenous folk was always there in Australia. However, in 1788, with the First Fleet, there were folk who were educating their children and the children of the military and some of the convict children in homes. This occurred in Sydney, in Parramatta and Norfolk Island about the same time, 1788, 1789.
You know, when we talk Christian values in schooling and homeschooling, we're going right back to the beginning of colonisation here in Australia as well, because it was the first chaplain, Richard Johnson, who started the first school, and it was a Christian school.
Indeed, yes it was, and he had in the first instance 55 children being educated in the school, and of course it grew at least for 5 years until someone somewhat naughtily burnt the church down, but that did not stop the spread of education and indeed religious education across the colony. It was in those days. Eventually, the government stepped in and formed what we now call the dual education system, private and government education.
You know, there's a big question, I think, that there are a lot of people ask about homeschooling, because there's an assumption that because we've got a state schooling system, and there's like a mandatory requirement that you're going to educate your children, some people think about homeschooling and they wonder if it's legal. Any thoughts here?
Yes, look, back in the old days, when we first started homeschooling way back in the 1980s, it was an issue because there was not legislation in the state in which we lived for homeschooling. And that was true for all states and territories. However, as it grew in popularity, various states and territories have adopted and developed laws that make homeschooling a legal form of education. That doesn't mean to say that the government creates the legality. Homeschooling was a parent right from Adam and Eve. So we mustn't overlook that issue as well. It's a parental issue.
A parental right, but not every parent sees their own capacity to be able to educate their children the way a professional school teacher might do. Do you find, in your 31 years at the helm of Australian Christian homeschooling, that you've had parents coming in, they're very doubtful about their own skills, and have they been able to rise to the occasion?
Oh, certainly. There are homeschoolers across Australia that aren't a member of any body like our body, which is Australian Christian Homeschooling. So they can do it themselves. Within our group, Australian Christian Homeschooling, we diagnose the children for their maths, English and reading and spelling levels, wherever they're at. And then after we've diagnosed the child's correct level for their academic ability, we then prescribe the correct level of curriculum, and the children have the correct level of curriculum. And on top of that, we train the parents on the use of the curriculum, so it's almost a foolproof system.
All right, that makes people no doubt a little more comfortable if they know that part of the process for homeschooling actually is the parent gets trained as well. And it's not training you to be a school teacher, but it's giving you some of those skills that a school teacher might have that you can apply in your own home context.
That's right. It's definitely not school at home. It's learning at home. Learning is the issue, and we just train the parents in the correct use of the curriculum so their children maximise the benefits of it.
Talking curriculum here for a few moments. You've got federal, state and territorial governments controlling curriculum. Sometimes we hear about, national curriculum, and then we've got homeschooling curriculum. How does that all interact together? Are there obligations for homeschooling providers to be able to provide particular elements that are in some ways mandatory in a federal curriculum? How does that all work, the interaction?
Essentially, there are no requirements of homeschoolers in most states and territories. Some states, would like to see an alignment with the Australian curriculum. The Australian curriculum was developed by Julia Gillard in 2003, and now we're at the ninth version of it, so they keep changing it. And there are many great elements within the curriculum for schooling. It was written for schooling. It wasn't written for homeschooling. Homeschooling is far more flexible, far more interactive and relational. But the issues of what is in the Australian curriculum in terms of the 8 key learning areas, they're valuable for everybody. The problem in the Australian curriculum is where philosophical ideologues, people with particular agendas, have hijacked vast areas of that curriculum and impose their ideological inappropriateness, if I want to be kind, on the Australian school cohort. Now, homeschoolers would largely reject that, and that was the case here in Queensland, where we successfully nullified that in 2004.
So with a very secularised Australia today, the thought that in a national curriculum that there might be, even, as you say, those ideologues who might be revising history and taking even away, we start talking about, Christian schooling right from the very beginning. There are ideologues who want to take that sort of thing out and say, let's not remind people that it was Christianity that actually helped shape education in Australia. This thought that there are those ideologues who have their fingers in the pie around the curriculum, is this something that's driving parents, do you think, to say, I don't want that, I want actually to be able to recognise truth in the history, truth in the curriculum?
Indeed. In fact, that's one of the major drivers that I found in my recent research that caused people to leave traditional schooling and to take on homeschooling, just simply because of the inappropriate philosophies around government preferred philosophies. That can be around sexuality, that can be around climate, that can be around all those sorts of things, and people want to think for themselves and they want to train their children to think for themselves. So that, yes, that has driven a lot of the homeschooling growth in this country.
For parents, my suspicion is some will get to a point where the penny drops and they go, I thought it was just rumour, but this is really what my kids are being taught under a sort of a state school curriculum. When the penny drops, it's like, I've got to take some control here as a parent because my child's future is at risk. Is that sort of the sentiment? What's the main sentiment that drives parents in that area?
It's a desire for them to transfer their values, their culture to the next generation, that is their children, whereas they would see that in many instances the government is seeking to develop a generation of atheists.
Life, culture and current events from a biblical perspective. 2020 on Vision.
In fact, Terry, why don't we take a call from Hadassah, who's in South Australia. Hello, Hadassah. Welcome.
Thank you.
What are your thoughts?
So I'm homeschooled. I've been homeschooled for 10 and a half years. I really like it. They took us out so that we could, our parents, so they could protect our education, so that we could not have the bad stuff in it. And at the moment, I am doing a Cert 3 in fitness.
Fabulous. Hey, Hadassah, let me ask you, do you feel like you've missed out on all of the bad stuff that your parents were trying to rescue you from?
No, I don't think so. I feel very blessed to be able to, not have been exposed to that.
Okay, and are you an only child, or do you have some siblings who were also homeschooled?
No, there's 4 of us.
4 of you, all right, and are you the eldest or the youngest?
Second oldest.
You're second eldest. And is this your whole schooling life that you've been in homeschooling?
Yeah, it's been my whole schooling. I went to kindy, and I loved that. And then we started homeschooling after that.
Fabulous. You know, Terry, what are your thoughts here for Hadassah?
What a joy to hear your testimony, Hadassah. It's fantastic, and congratulations in doing your certificate studies, and I wish you all the best there. What would you say was your greatest enjoyment of homeschooling?
I'd say being able to have the freedom to study what I feel I like, and then also being able to spend more time with family.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's definitely a family-focused entity, but you're out in the big wide world rather than 13 years just in an institution. And just before I go any further, just to say we're not against, homeschoolers are not against schooling, and in particular great Christian schools out there, but we are just rejoicing and celebrating the freedom, as Hadassah shares, the freedom and the flexibility for children and parents.
Yeah, we're definitely not against it. There's some Christian schools here, but they're more than an hour away. So we decided to homeschool, and we've really liked it.
You know, it's interesting, isn't it? What rises to the surface here, as I'm hearing the conversation, is that when a parent chooses to do homeschooling, it's not a protest against the system, but it is a way of actually taking back that empowerment you have as a parent. Terry, is this something that, some people no doubt will be sort of protesting the system, I'm taking my kids out of that, but it's not necessarily always a protest, but it's just taking back that level of empowerment.
Yes, parents are the original educators of their own children, and we must never forget that. We do respect that every state and territory has a Minister for Education, but that's a second option for parents, and of course many Aussie parents delegate their responsibility for the education of the children to the minister and to state or non-state schooling. That's fine. But we always need to know that this is a God-ordained mandate, which is parenting. I'll just read out a scripture. It says here that in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 5 to 7, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. Now that's a command to parents. Parents, you must love the Lord. And these words which I command you today shall be in your hearts. That is, you parents, to be in your hearts. And it says next, you shall teach the words of God, you shall teach them diligently to your children and talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, when you rise up. So it's a responsibility of all parents, and in particular Christian parents, to teach their children and grow them spiritually.
Hadassah, let me ask you, when we talked about sort of the educational side of things, your parents, are they Christian, and that was part of the reason why they wanted to educate you in a homeschooling setting, and was your curriculum a Christian education curriculum? Can you reflect on that, Hadassah?
Yes, so we're in a Christian home. That was part of the reasons they wanted us to homeschool us, was so that they could teach us the ways of the Lord. We did ACE for a while, so a Christian PACE, and then we've just done different curriculums over the years.
And Terry's just nodding because the ACE system is what came from the Australian Christian Homeschooling. So just fabulous. Hadassah, I want to thank you so much for calling in and just sharing your heart with your own experience of being a homeschooler. Really great to hear from you. Look, our talkback line is open on 1800 316 316. You can send us a text on 0447 488 316. Let's continue to take some calls, shall we? Sharon is in Sunbury in Victoria. Hey, Sharon, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
What are your thoughts here?
Okay, so I withdrew my third and fourth son, who were twins, when they were in third grade, and had them home for 3 years. And people withdraw their children for various different reasons. Some reasons overlap and some are different. But it was interesting because I happened to be talking to my 40-year-old son just the other day, and we were talking about the homeschool experience, and you often wonder, what did they really think of it? How did it really affect them in the long term and all that? And just have to say, it was all positive. I wasn't particularly an educator. I was a mum. There was more about just the educational side of it that I wanted them home for. But when he went back to school and he started at high school, what he said was he was way ahead of everybody with maths in particular, which really surprised me because that's my weak spot. So just to say, you don't have to be a full-on educator, as in having been trained, to have your children at home, even for a period of time, if there's reasons you want them home for teaching them with one thing and another.
Wonderful insight, Sharon. And get our special guests' input here. So far as this sort of thing happens here, Terry, you've got parents and homeschooling. Just your thoughts here in general for Sharon. I'll come back with you, another question in a moment.
Well, certainly, hi Sharon, certainly from the point of view of psychology and anthropology, we all know that learning is inherent or normal, natural, inside of a child. God's put it there. So that must mean that we parents have a teaching capacity. And I call this teaching capacity the parental educational dynamic, which means that the parent has this incredible faith-based relationship with their child. Whatever mummy says, the child believes. And that I call the PED, the parental educational dynamic. It's the dynamic between the parent and the child that makes the parent a teacher. So congratulations, and great to hear those maths results for your young people.
While I've got Sharon here, Sharon, the interesting thing here is that while you are not necessarily a mathematical brain, your kids really pick this up. Is this coming down to the quality of the learning materials, the quality of the booklets that you use? I'll come to Terry on this for Sharon.
Yeah, sure, Neil. Look, good self-instructional materials, academic materials, are an excellent way to teach the children at home. But the other factor that Sharon has had with her children is that her children, whilst homeschooling, had a tutor, one-on-one tutoring relationship. How long was it, Sharon? 3 years or something?
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
you're one-on-one with them, developing that relationship, and you had a vested interest to make sure that they learned their 5 times table. Whereas and I don't knock classrooms. I've been a classroom teacher myself. A teacher with 25 or 30 kids, that teacher is doing a great job, but they don't know if every child has absorbed the 5 times table, whereas you did with your children.
That's true. And I did hear once that the parent is the best educator of their own child, not necessarily everyone else's, but and that was an encouragement when I was doing it. There were 2 really worthwhile. The educating the maths and English and history and all those things, they had to be done. But one of the reasons I had mine home was that one of the reasons was that I felt they were starting to misbehave a little bit, and I thought, I don't want big 16-year-old boys standing over me being cheeky. So that was a smaller thing. One of the other things was when I'd go up to school for the mid-year and end-year reports, the teachers would say, oh, they're struggling in that, but you could do this, you could do that, you could try this, you could do this. And I thought, goodness me, if I did that, I'd have to have them home.
That's right.
But one of the other really, really good side benefits of doing the homeschooling with my boys, and they were home for grade 3, 4, 5 and 6. Right. So in grade 6 we did a subject which I told them, this is a couch subject. We don't sit at the table for this one. And I'd explored around for the best book I could find on sex education. And you know, they sat either side of me, and I started reading this book on the couch, and at the beginning they're both facing out each side, and by the time we finished the first day, they're both facing in, looking at the page, and very engaged.
That's it. Sharon, I wish we could carry on with this, but it's news time and I've got to go, but we might talk some more about that after the news. Sharon, I want to thank you for your call. Sharon in Sunbury in Victoria. Now, you can join in our conversation. We'd love to hear from you. We'll take some more calls in just a few moments, but just quickly before we do, Terry, just before the news, we heard from Sharon, who was talking about the sex education that happens within the curriculum for homeschooling, teaching her teenage boys and, the discomfort that might have caused. I wonder if you've got any thoughts here. How that element of the homeschooling curriculum works, and parents, whether they're a bit nervous about that time when they're going to teach their children.
Well, yes, the last caller, Sharon, referred to some of the sexual issues. Look, sexuality is fundamental to the education of a child. They say the first thing a child will discriminate is up versus down. But then looking at mum and dad, they then discriminate between male and female as God has created them. And to teach children about their sexuality is a vital thing, and to guide them through. And this takes 15, 20 years. You guide your child right through all the modes of development beyond puberty and into adulthood. Very, very important part. And that's a thing that came out in my research, that parents were very interested and quite amazed at how promiscuity is advocated among many in schools, not all schools, but and thank God not in Christian schools, but then also gender confusion and dysphoria, all those issues that have been imposed upon our culture appear, of course, in the school curriculum with advocates, teachers who are advocates for teaching those ideologies. So parents have decided, who homeschool, they've decided to take that responsibility back.
Okay, we're taking calls, and you can help direct where our conversation goes. Let's take another call. Stacey is on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. Hello, Stacey. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
What are your thoughts, Stacey?
Well, I just thought I'd share a bit of our journey. So we had a son to begin with, and I had been reading the book Bringing Up Boys by James Dobson. And there's a little section in there where he recommended, particularly for boys, to start them with homeschooling, at least till around the age of 8, just because they're so physical and they learn so differently to girls. So we did ACE to start, and I've done a mix of homeschooling and distance ed, and we've got 4 children now. My eldest is now 21, and it's been a really positive experience. Probably the only downside for us is because we're first-generation Christians, our families didn't really appreciate it. I think now they look back and think, their kids have turned out fine and good, but yeah.
But they had all sorts of cynical doubts about the homeschooling process. Was that because you were, as you say, first-generation Christians? They were concerned about that dimension of your reasoning for homeschooling, Stacey?
I reckon a little bit, definitely the Christian side, but also because my father-in-law's a school teacher, so he was looking at me thinking, well, she's not qualified, and that sort of reasoning. Every year they would say, when's he going to a real school? When's he going to a real school? But they gave up when he was probably 10.
And your kids, and they've moved into, what you would say as a parent, they've moved into an appropriate career?
Well, I've got one on summer camp in America right now, and my eldest son's just done 2 years summer camp. I wouldn't say they're in an actual career yet, but we're just letting them choose what they want to do. One's been to Bible college, and then my youngest is year 11 now, and he's still doing distance ed. But one thing he did was around grade 10, a public school local to us was willing to take them in for a TAFE course. So they did almost like a dual schooling thing, and I thought this would maybe help some people, is they did, both my oldest two on this, they've done a TAFE course through real school at the same time as doing the rest of their education.
Wonderful thoughts and insights that you're offering here, Stacey. Let's get a thought or two from our special guest. What are your thoughts here, Terry?
Hi, Stacey. Yeah, great to hear the progress of your children from childhood through into young adulthood. Fantastic. Yes, across Australia, there's a program called TAFE at School, and homeschool children are able to access that, and they usually would find an RTO and access the program. So, and that talks that really looks at the introduction of tertiary education to homeschoolers. My research has shown that homeschool graduates are able to access university courses right around Australia, all of the universities, access TAFE colleges and institutes, and so there's no real impediment to children who are homeschooled to access tertiary education in Australia.
Wonderful. Stacey, anything further to add?
No, not necessarily. I just think we just kept our kids in a lot of sport and activities, drama. My second daughter, one that's in America, she's an official florist now. So, yeah, I just think there's heaps of possibilities, and you can teach them, if they've got a real interest in a certain thing, you can just go hard in that area, even sport and stuff.
Wonderful stuff. Stacey, thank you so much for a great contribution to our conversation today. 1-800-316-316. You can help direct where our conversation goes. Let's take another call. Julie is in Albany in WA. Hey, Julie, welcome.
Thank you, and good morning to both of you.
What are your thoughts here, Julie?
Well, I've actually worked with Terry at the Australian Christian College, Southland, here in Albany.
Hi, Julie.
So, good morning, Terry.
Yeah, good to hear your voice.
Sorry?
Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to hear you this morning. I've actually been on both sides of the fence, having homeschooled my son and my oldest daughter, but also been involved in helping other parents work into the curriculum themselves. Now, the reason I homeschooled my son is because of learning disabilities and being told that my son would only ever be worth pushing a trolley around a Woolies car park. So I took him out of schooling, popped him into homeschooling through Australian Christian College, Southland. He is now a FIFO, a fully qualified mechanic. He's upskilling himself to be a higher level mechanic. His apprenticeship did take him an extra year and a half because of his learning disabilities, but he did it. So
Wonderful.
Homeschooling, being able to homeschool him and learn at his own pace, he got there in the end.
Wonderful, wonderful, Julie, to hear. It's you have a good curriculum, but there's also that parental input, the relationship you have with your son. You understand him better than anybody else, and you're able to allow for his strengths and also allow for his weaknesses and bring him to a point where he can just function so well. That's such a joyful thing to hear. Well done.
Julie, thank you so much for participating in our conversation today. 1800 316 316. You might like to join in, help direct where our conversation goes as we talk about the rise of homeschooling. Our special guest is Dr. Terry Harding, and 31 years at the helm of the Australian Christian Homeschooling, which is the oldest provider of homeschooling, Christian homeschooling here in Australia. Let's take another call. Natalie is in Camp Mountain in Queensland. Hey, Natalie, welcome.
Hey, just a different point, I guess. I have children who have their own children too now, and one in particular is living out near Warwick now on a property, and they have 3 young children, the eldest being in grade 1 and very far advanced curriculum-wise. She's a very bright little bunny. And they, particularly my daughter, would absolutely do anything to be able to homeschool these kids because they're Christian, they want to impart all those good things. These kids are so open to learning, they would be a breeze to homeschool. She loves spending time with them. They're on a farm. They can do all those nice farm things as well as, and there's so much learning to be done on a farm. But they have crunched and recrunched the numbers and they just simply cannot afford to not be working. And it's as simple as that. And we have this conversation all the time, and I don't know what you do about that.
You know, in this day and age, I think you're really describing here, Natalie, you need 2 incomes just to pay the mortgage, just to keep food on the table, just to survive. And it's not an option for parents easily. In fact, those that do are making some financial sacrifices, no doubt. Terry, what are your thoughts around the economics and crunching numbers? And you know, sometimes you feel locked out of the homeschooling, even though you can see it's got a good benefit for your family.
Yes, the economic factor is a big one for homeschoolers. They automatically go to a single income where one spouse, partner, will seek to earn the income and the other does the education side of it full time. So it's a bit of a dilemma there if economics make it so hard for one partner to drop out of the workforce. It's very hard. It depends. Like every family's different, and every family's economics is different. Quite often you can by sacrificing, etc. But then on a farm, I understand, the expenses and the mortgage. Whatever you do, you just have to be responsible for their education. And if they're in schooling, that's fine. But you and your husband need to be on top of what they're learning, and on top of that, putting in that good input about God and Christ and grace and freedom and educating them that way. And the Lord knows your dilemma. You bring it to Him and just go with what you're at right now, and who knows what the future will give you.
And Natalie, I think you said this is your children's children. These are your grandchildren.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Is there a role that grandparents can play in the homeschooling process here, Terry?
Indeed. We have in Australian Christian homeschooling numbers of grandparents who are doing it for various reasons for their children. In other words, home educating their grandchildren. So that's a possibility, yeah.
Natalie, anything further you'd like to add?
No, thank you. No, and these parents certainly do input a lot at home, besides the kids being at school, and they have sent them to a really good school. And can I give a plug to Warwick Christian College? It is amazing.
Sure.
Yeah. So they've decided, well, that's their compromise, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's a tough one. That's all.
Well, as you were saying, there are some great Christian schools out there. And I've been principal of 5 of them, and that's another option. Yeah.
Wonderful to hear from you, Natalie. Natalie in Camp Mountain in Queensland. Our talkback line open, 1800 316 316. If you'd like to join in our conversation, still time to take a call or two, or you can send us a text on 0447 488 316. As we got one from Cole. Cole from Parks says, I am a school chaplain. Teachers in my school are not permitted to teach multiplication tables, and it is deviating for the kids. Now, I think that deviating is the word that I've got there in the text, but I mean, teachers and what they are and are not allowed to teach. I'm not sure about the multiplication tables, but is this something you're across this sort of thing, Terry?
Certainly, in 2021, I helped the school to turn their NAPLAN scores around dramatically just through retraining the teachers using explicit instruction. The problem we've got in Australia is that most universities and teacher training colleges do not teach explicit instruction. So what's happened in this situation with Cole is that someone, probably the head of department or the head of education in that school, has said this is the way we're going to do it, and we definitely won't go that old-fashioned rote memory method. However, I would just encourage you, perhaps Cole, to maybe join LDA, Learning Difficulties Australia. Just subscribe to them, make some connections, and learn about explicit instruction techniques, particularly reading and English and mathematics, and that'll help you to become a far better teacher.
You know, the calls we've taken so far have primarily been positive experiences with homeschooling. The big thing that stands out, of course, is the sacrifice that parents make and the need for one parent to be the breadwinner and the other to be like a full-time commitment to being the at-home school teacher in that sense. Yeah. Does it work when you've got mum and dad sharing responsibilities around kids, or is it primarily it's going to be, you know, one's got a career and the other one's committed to the homeschooling?
Look, there are no rules with this. It's all about parenting. We have dual parents, one in the workforce, one homeschooling. Dual parenting where they share the responsibilities for the education. We have single parent families where the mum somehow is able to home educate even though there isn't another partner, and they're home educating their children. I call them the champion educators of Australia. And we have all diverse family structures. And the whole point is to be teaching your children. Yes, academics are great, but you're teaching your children how to live and how to love the Lord.
Terry, do some parents mix and match curriculum? They actually have a choice of taking something from here and something from there. It's like the parent's choice. Maybe they're good choices, maybe sometimes they're not, but you've got the freedom to do that.
Absolutely. Home education allows full flexibility, and all home educators will add or subtract what they believe is relevant to their children. On top of that, you've got the internet, so the children have access to the world's knowledge as well. So, yes, you can chop and change. I call that the eclectic method, and then you've also got the unschooling method that is more child-directed. So curriculum choices are up to the parents where they see it suits the children.
Come back to this, what is for some parents a very contentious thing, the thought of socialising their children, and the thought that to do that you've got to have them in a cohort of 30 kids in a class. Maybe they're going to go through primary school with a similar sort of cohort of students. What are your thoughts here on socialisation? Because some people will be asking that question about, putting my child into a classroom, isn't that a positive experience? As clearly it's not for some.
Look, firstly, again, we're not arguing against schooling, but it is an artificial construct to have your child solely with age peers, 30 of them, for 13 years of the most important learning years of their life. It's just an artificial construct. Secondly, in that environment, the child isn't free so much because they have those kids imposed upon them and relationships imposed upon them. It's harder to choose. Thirdly, some of that influence at school will be good peers, good peer influence, good peer instruction and association, and some of it will be bad, and my research showed that. But foundationally, the socialisation, the social development of a child comes from the family home. I'll give you a good scripture that I've shared with many people across Australia and across the world. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. It says this: "He who walks with the wise will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed." Now that scripture just says who you associate with affects you. And so it's important for kids to be with their wise parents, and if they're in a school, with wise peers and wise teachers. And if they hang around and hang out with people of ill repute or who are what the Bible calls fools, they'll become like them. So socialisation and social development is really important.
Let's squeeze in one more call. Ebony is in Broken Hill in New South Wales. Hey, Ebony, what are your thoughts?
I just thought I'd offer some experience. I've been homeschooling for about 8 years now, and one way we've been able to manage to do it is I'm studying, and I'm hoping to do a few hours in the evening to do some counselling from home. So I'm in the home. It'll be in the evening when the kids are in bed, and that's going to be some additional income for us. And in regard to socialisation, we find that we get plenty of socialisation in. The kids talk to the staff at the library. We go a few times a week. Just different people in the community, sports, church. There's so many opportunities for your kids to be socialised. And like it's been said, like the school's very institutionalised around the same people every day, whereas your homeschooling, kids have heaps of opportunities to get out and about and talk to all different sorts of people.
Ebony, thanks so much for sharing your wonderful experience there. Almost out of time, just wanted to ask Terry, you might have a special response here for Ebony, but when you've got the issues around bullying and anxiety in kids, when we're talking socialising children, are some of those things minimised when you're doing a homeschooling curriculum? Or, anyway, thoughts here for Ebony, but those sorts of things going through my mind as Ebony's sharing her experience.
Yes, socialisation is a big issue in the development of all children, and they need to be associating with people who are wise and who are not rebellious. That's a key factor. And bullying as well is an issue, a big one that came up in the research. Many people were concerned about their children being depressed by bullying, and a couple of instances in the research, the parents were saying they were children were suicidal. So this is a vital issue. Who you associate with will be influential on child development.
Ebony in Broken Hill in New South Wales. Ebony, thank you so much for your call. Hey, time has run out. We were talking about Australian Christian homeschooling. You've been at the helm for the last 31 years. You've just passed over the baton. There's a new manager there now. What's the new chief's name?
It's Mr. Matthew Cannell. Hi, Matt. He's out there somewhere. And we have our office at North Lakes in Queensland, but service all states and territories of Australia and overseas. And you can contact them at achs.edu.au.
achs.edu.au to connect with Australian Christian homeschooling. Dr. Terry Harding has been our guest, and great talking to you about these things, Terry. Appreciate your warmth and your ability to be able to talk about some of the issues and some of the challenges that parents face. Just tremendous catching up with you once again. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, listeners.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.